Good evening, everybody. My name is Hugh Brady. I will be the moderator of tonight's discussion. I am a board member of the North Suburb. Let's try this again. It's a brand new NAMI chapter that was formed by the merger of two earlier NAMI chapters. So we are NAMI Northwest Suburbs of Chicago. And I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight. Let me do one little bit of housekeeping first. If you have questions, there's a time built in at the end of the agenda for questions. If you just would write your questions out on a 3x5 card that Lori is out there handing out, and Lori or Tracy will give me the questions at about 8:15, and we can get hopefully answers from our panelists. Let me introduce our panel tonight. We have, first of all, we have Kara Murphy. She is the president of the DuPage Health Coalition, and she is going to talk to us about 708 boards and how they operate. And she, as I understand, is a board member of the 708 board, so that'll be excellent. And then we have Warren Newhauser. He is the parent, the father of a child with a developmental and intellectual disability. He's going to talk about the topic this evening from the parent's perspective. And then we have Hollis Gorey, who is the vice president of programs for Clearbrook, which is a local service provider for people with various developmental disabilities and mental illnesses. We have Karen Fay, who is the grants manager for the Center for Enriched Living. And finally, Francesca Kenny, who is a board member of a group called Ups and Downs. So welcome, everybody. One little bit of information before we get started. The groups that we're talking about tonight are variously called 708 boards or community mental health boards. And the reason for the neither of those names is really perfect. When you say 708 boards, people think of area code 708. Which this does not apply to, and it doesn't say a bit of what 708 a board could do. Is it regulate Verizon or something? No. And then also called community mental health boards. That's the language that's used in the statute, but that's inadequate or not completely explanatory, because the 708 boards or the community mental health boards also arrange for services for people living with substance abuse challenges and also with developmental and intellectual disabilities. So it's a much broader than just a mental health focus. So with that in mind, let's start out with Kara, who's going to tell us a little bit about 708 boards or community mental health boards and how they operate and so on. Go ahead, Kara, you're up.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and thanks very much for your interest on this topic on a very rainy night. Mike promised me that I didn't have to prepare remarks, and I didn't. But I am happy to talk off the cuff about my own experience, and I should share my day job is as the president of a nonprofit called the DuPage Health Coalition, which coordinates health access for low-income, uninsured residents of DuPage County. And that means I'm also, as a executive director of a nonprofit, a recipient of 708 funding for another township, not the board on which I sit. And in fact, relevant to say that one of the decisions that I had to make when I was invited to consider sitting on the Wheeling Township 708 board, which was just recently founded, was whether or not I was comfortable declining to seek funding, because of course I would never sit on a board and then ask it to fund my agency. So I actually had to have that conversation with my board, and to their credit, they were very receptive to the idea that there are lots of ways that you can participate and they don't always. So we have been the recipients of the Health Coalition for the last several years of Bloomingdale Township 708 board funding, which actually helps to pay for medications, typically mental health medications for our low-income, uninsured DuPage County residents that are enrolled in a program called Access DuPage. But I'm here today primarily to talk about the experience of being a 708 board member. I'm the secretary of the Milton Township Board. Milton Township is one of the newest 708 boards in our area. We actually were just convened as a board last summer, and we're going through our first funding cycle as we speak, reviewing those applications that have come to us over the course of the summer with the anticipation of awards that will be made in December and January. So by way of a little bit of background, community mental health boards, and you did a good job of detailing both the colloquial terms that we use and the fact that none of them are really quite adequate to describe what a 708 does. But they were first established by the Community Mental Health Act in 1963. To establish a 708, probably many folks in the room are aware, requires first that you pass a referendum. So this is ultimately the voice of the taxpayers deciding that this is an area that they wish to commit their own resources and the resources of their community. I think that if you're in this room today, it's probably with an awareness and a sensitivity to the fact that we live in times of unparalleled social and emotional crisis, and that we need to be collaborative, we need to be ingenious, we need to be partnering, but we need to be investing in some real solutions. And unfortunately, many of the solutions that we need require dollars that have not historically been available to organizations like those at this table. You establish a 708 with the passage of a local referendum. Counties can do this, villages can do this, unincorporated towns, townships, and you can then join 708s together in some unique ways as well to grow to scale. But with the passage, then local government units levy an annual tax. And so by way of peeling back the curtain a little bit, I will say that that was a big piece of what the first year of being a new 708 board looked like. I am one of 7 members of our 708. Our 708 represents myself and another mental health clinician who is herself an ED. She's the president and I'm the secretary of the board. But in addition, we have 2 attorneys that have a healthcare or mental health focus and interest. We have a pastor, we have a social worker that works primarily with seniors. And so I really give credit to the township. Townships are not necessarily experts in behavioral health, substance use disorder, or services for individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities. The goal is not that the township be the board, but rather the township invest in finding Milton Township, in my case, residents who are well positioned to volunteer their time and to take the time to make sure that they're well apprised of the needs of the community. There are also some other components that are required for a 708. We are required to do a community health needs assessment, and we can talk a little bit more about that, but I'm grateful that we are doing a community health needs assessment in a time where there's a whole lot of data that is more easily accessible to us than there has been ever before. And in DuPage County, we're especially lucky because of a collective impact and data dashboard resource called Impact DuPage, which we were able to use to largely conduct our community needs assessment, which saved money to not have to spend it there and instead be able to put it directly into services. In addition, you need to have a 1-year and a 3-year plan that helps to detail where you are intending to focus. Some of that is prescribed by the 708 language, but some of it is also sort of putting your stake in the ground to say that these are the areas where we are especially interested or committed, and we want to make sure that we are living a principle that's sort of authentic to the Community Mental Health Board statute. So we worked closely. I will say that one of the things that can oftentimes be confusing is that in our case, Milton Township, which is for folks who are unaware, Wheaton, Glen Allen, and smaller portions of a number of other neighboring communities in DuPage County. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. We went to the board, and we, as an independent board, appointed by elected officials. So the township seats us, And then we function as an independent board subsequent to their seating us. All of the meetings are public. Every meeting that we have ever convened, and we meet about monthly, is open to the public, is recorded and typically streamed. The agendas, we comply with the Open Meetings Act like many other units of government. And that's something that you have to get used to a little bit, frankly, as someone who sits on lots of boards, but isn't typically used to them being such a public enterprise. But the intention is transparency because it's tax dollars. And so I respect the rationale by which all of that happens with great clarity to consumers. And we hope that that also inspires some confidence in the way that we're operating. Ultimately, we asked our township to consider a referendum that would have given us the equivalent of about $1.1 to $1.2 million a year in funding. And ultimately, the township trustees made a determination. This is one of the things that the 708 board doesn't get to choose. We can make recommendations, but the township ultimately determines the levy. And in our case, the levy was set for year one at $700,000. So then our goal became to figure out how to keep as much of that money going directly back into community investment as was humanly possible. And we're pleased that we will have overhead costs of no more than 10%, which includes the staffing and the grants development software and all of the facilities and administration. But it means that the overwhelming majority of those dollars are going right where they should be, back to our community agencies and partners. I will stop with that, I think, to make sure that we have plenty of time for everybody else to be able to speak, but happy to answer any other questions about the experience of being on the 708 board. It's actually been very rewarding.
Could you talk just a little bit about the needs assessment and how you did that? I know that folks we had at the previous forum talked about hiring an outside company from NIU or outside group from NIU to do the needs assessment.
I'm familiar with a number of entities that have done that, and I certainly don't take exception to that being a good finished product. I think that we just have a resource and an asset in DuPage County that not every community has. So another hat is that I happen to be the co-chair of Impact DuPage, which is myself and the head of the DuPage County Health Department are co-chairs of Impact DuPage. And as I shared, that's a collective impact arm that is a public-private collaborative partnership intended to really help set goals both for our public health partners and our community of community-based organizations, and then work purposefully together on achieving those goals. So we set a number of priorities each year. In addition, with help of both the health department and a number of hospitals and other community institutions, we fund a website, which I would invite you to take a look at, which is called Impact DuPage. And it is a trove of data available through the ACS and the census and a host of other curated tools. You can go down to the census tract, to the municipality, to the zip code with many health indicators and social disparities indicators. And so we were actually able to use that and our partnerships with a number of the community-based organizations that are leaders in this space to create our own community health needs assessment. I do have a copy of it here. I'm happy to share it with people. But it was much simpler. It was free. And for us, we were very pleased with the final product.
So if those that are working on this forum tonight are the Schaumburg group and the Township group, and so if a board is established, it could use its own resources and expertise, or if they felt the need, they could contract out with somebody who could do it.
There are what, 90 different 708 boards around the Illinois area. And I think there are probably at least 85 different ways that this has been done. What's important is that you really do have to have a clear and cogent sense of what your community needs. And part of what we did was to use that data. A part of it was to use the knowledge and backgrounds that we had. And a part of it was to lean into our friends and our relationships and to collect also from them resources that we could help to put into place.
Okay, great, thanks. So let's go now to Warren Newhouser, who's father of a child with intellectual developmental disabilities, and talk a little bit about, how what things have happened and how things have gone with his family. So.
Okay. I've never talked publicly about my daughter's disability before, but I said, let's give it a shot here. My wife and I and my younger daughter, Catherine, live in the Northgate area of Arlington Heights, up north here toward Dundee Road, Buffalo Grove Road. We've been there for about 18. Mill Creek subdivision in Buffalo Grove for 15 years. So we've been in this area for quite a while. My wife, Linda, she's also actively involved in managing my daughter, Catherine's disability and all the programs, and she could give this talk, if not better than I could. So I want to talk. Are we doing the audio?
Test. I'm loud without a microphone.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, I can do it now. So I'm gonna condense 28 years into 2.8 minutes. I'll give it a try here. So the first part is just kind of a what has happened. So my daughter was diagnosed with a nonverbal learning disability when she was very young. She suffered an infection of RSV, which is a form of infant pneumonia, at which point we felt that her blood oxygen probably tanked a little bit low for too long. So the result is a nonverbal learning disability, as I mentioned. She's perfectly mobile. She has no physical limitations, but she's a little bit lower IQ. Things like becoming independent would be her challenge. So to bring the journey from K through 8, we were in District 21, which is in Wheeling Township. We had regular IEP meetings with this young lady here, Nancy. How are you? School psychologist. So I think that was about 3 times a year, maybe 4 times. I don't remember. Where you do your needs assessment, you get assigned resources, set and monitor goals, development for your child, and that stands for individualized education plan. The examples would be which classes would Catherine be mainstreamed in, which classes would she need to be special ed, speech therapy, OT, and any other accommodations she needs would all be discussed in this and reviewed continuously while she's in the district. These were very spirited meetings. And I gave my wife the box of Kleenex when she walked in because there was always tears in those meetings. Okay. Years later, they told us how much they enjoyed having us in there. So that was very nice to hear. So we'll move up to District 214 High School District. Now things get a little tougher. Same IEP meetings, same bigger team. Catherine suffered a lot of harassment and even a physical threat. I'd say took good care of it very well. First name basis with them and had them on speed dial, unfortunately, which was not good for her, but that's just what happened. The 214 team, the IEP team, informed us that once your child gets out of the high school district, once they get their diploma, I think it's actually once they physically take possession of the diploma, that they are no longer eligible for services in the high school district. I see it now out there, so I recall that correctly. So what they did in 214 was extended her graduation by almost a year, got her an internship at Walgreens. I think we even had one at the Hyatt hotels, I recall. But then they warned us that you're going to fall off a cliff. Like once she graduates, there's no more services out there. Yeah, by the time she graduated, I remember looking at a closet one time and the stack of IEP meeting notes, psychology evaluations, reports, doctors, and it was almost a foot tall. So it was a lot of paperwork for that. I'll keep going here. Catherine enrolled at Harper College. They have what's called a Career Skills Institute, which is a fairly new program. Well, new for children with young adults with disabilities. It's a 2-year program, and it's mainly life living skills. During that time, she had several internships within Harper, working for different areas within Harper College. And so that was very good. At the same time, we applied for SSI, Social Security, Supplemental Security Income. We waited and waited and waited. It was an exercise in patience and humility with Social Security. But I do want to shout out, we did get introduced to Brian and Benji Rubin with the Rubin Law Firm, and anybody with the child and disabilities probably knows or has heard of them in one way. Maze of eligibility requirements, which we cannot keep in our head, and we just was on a Zoom meeting last week with them about guardianship. So they're very knowledgeable in that area, and I highly recommend you talk to them if you have a child going through this. So after graduation from Harper, she actually got a job offer at Harper College, and she still works there today. She just had her 5-year anniversary. That's very cool. Then during this, I guess I forgot it here, somewhere right around graduation, we entered her on the PUNS list, which is I don't even know what that acronym stands for. Priority
Services.
Emergency services. Okay, I knew the first word, priority. And then last fall, her number came up. So we got contacted by an organization called CAU Alternatives Unlimited, which is a contractor to Illinois, the state of Illinois Department of Human Services. That's correct.
Yep.
So DHS does not manage any cases. They contract with CAU, which they don't manage any cases, if that's correct. So they contract with folks like Clearbrook to do the actual case management. So we started working on plans, putting together her personal plan. Numerous Zoom meetings, in-person meetings that's been going on for a long time. Catherine right now has a personal support worker from Clearbrook. She does stuff in the house and outside the home. So today she was over, they worked on some stuff at home, and then they went out and did a little shopping trip. She'd taken a class with Catherine and Harper, a cooking class. She's done, I think, a class here at the library, maybe some other class somewhere else. But it's been a very good experience for her. We also recently received her formal personal plan, which is this document right here. This is from Community Alternatives Unlimited, and it's basically goes through what are the problems, what are the issues, what communication styles, Medicaid, Medicare, choice and decision making, future plans, recreations, hobbies, what entity is responsible, all that kind of information in there. But the bottom line is that all we can really find is the personal support worker. So we haven't been able to find like social groups or vocational groups or anything to help her yet. We just haven't been able to identify that. Wraparound services, I guess you call it, Nancy. And again, this kind of impacts her chances of becoming independent. And she's approaching 30, so it's kind of there's a little bit of urgency there for us. So that's where it is. So let's go to part 2. This is a lot quicker here, but if I could take out a magic wand, I do this at work sometimes because I'm in the software industry, and I talk to customers and say, what do you want the software to do? And well, if it did this and didn't, they have a lot of limitations in their mind. So I said, well, let's just wave a magic wand and let's pretend there's no limitations. So I'll take out my magic wand and I'll just wave it and I'll say, if I could have anything, this is what it would be. As a dad who's faced with a daughter with a learning disability, and the rest of my life will be consumed with making sure she's taken care of when I'm no longer around. So the number one, and this is probably the most important thing, is that all young adults, whether post-college or post-secondary, you could maybe say if they go to college after that, would get funded immediately for services, period, end of story. With Catherine, it's almost a 10-year gap. So we've lost almost 10 years of that. I've heard Brian Rubin mention this just last week, that Illinois is ranked 43 out of 50 services, or for people with disabilities. So if we could do that, we basically solve a lot of problems up front with keeping kids on in the system. The other thing I'd say that would result from this would be an infrastructure ecosystem of providers, programs, groups, housing co-ops, organizations to serve the young adults. We don't seem to find the ones for my daughter's disability. I know, like for Down syndrome and for Asperger's, there are groups for that, but we just haven't found the ones for us. And it's also finding it's not very easy to create some of the stuff on your own. Also, we're informed that, and I still got my magic wand out here, that from CAU, that employers are really not offered any incentives to hire people with disabilities. Well, they're offered a $500 one-time incentive, and they told us that it wasn't worth their time to do it. I mean, so if we could have anything, it would be, let's put something to make, especially kids employable somehow, some way. As a last example, we have a friend, a close friend of mine that I grew up with, and he has a son with Asperger's, and he's actually 2 years old. He's the same age as my older daughter. And he lives in Madison, Wisconsin, and after years and years and years of getting services, he's been able to get himself a good full-time job. He's been able to get himself to the point where he's got a condo. He recently got his driver's license, and he's now looking for a house, small house, because he likes to garden. And the most amazing thing is he's off disability. So I'm not saying every kid is going to come off disability, but they put the investment into him, and now he's off. He's off. Just he doesn't have anything at all to do with disabilities anymore. So by getting him early, I think we could have a shot at that.
So if I could ask a question, did your daughter go on the funds list when she graduated from high school, or or from Harvard? Or do you
It was
remember?
it was like 18, I think.
Okay.
I think it's, you start getting to start talking to them at 18.
And how long was she on the list?
Almost 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there's a 10-year gap there.
Thank you very much. So a question for the 3 other panelists. One question is, could you tell us just a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in working in this area, and then also tell us about your organization and what it does. So why don't we start with Hollis?
Sure. All right. I talk pretty loud too, so I'm not sure if I need this or not. But Warren, thanks for sharing that story. I'm Hollis Gorey. I'm Vice President of Programs at Clearbrook. A little bit about myself. This is my 21st year working at Clearbrook. I started when I was fresh out of college. I had an internship down in Bloomington Normal at a small not-for-profit that does exactly what Clearbrook did on a smaller scale, and really enjoyed the population and not-for-profit management. So started there in our employment services program, and then moved into a small program that we called Home Base, which actually Warren's daughter is in. And we're now, I think about a little under 1,450, so 1,450 families we serve across 16 counties in the state of Illinois in this similar type of program. So my job over the past 2 decades has been a joy. I've gotten to grow a program and see it change. My job's changed tremendously. Now I oversee our home-based program. We have a respite grant program, our supported employment program. We also have a supportive housing program that I oversee, and our newest established service, which is our community mental health or behavioral health service line. So I have a lot of different hats, but it's all been very fun. Clearbrook is approaching 65 years of servicing people with IDD in the community. Primarily started in Arlington Heights, but now services a number of different communities. And we do, you name it, we do it. We have a CFC program, an early intervention program, which Nancy told me tonight that she worked in a long time ago, which was awesome. We have community day services. So those are places where individuals with disabilities can go during the day to work on a variety of different things, whether it be community access or job placement skills, socialization or social groups. It kind of runs the gamut. And then we also do residential services in a variety of ways, where we have individual group homes, or you might have heard the acronym CILA, Community Integrated Living Arrangements, where anywhere from 4 to 8 residents live in a home in the community like you or I would. And then we also have intermittent care facilities, which are for individuals with IDD that need more have higher medical needs, and need some skilled nursing and medication management. So we have a variety of services that way. We also have clinical services that we provide. So we have our behavioral health service line, where we're looking at community mental health, and we do job placement or IPS for individuals in those programs. And then we also have a robust BCBA program. In addition to that, we have a clinic that provides PT, OT, and speech for people with IDD. Questions, right? You want us to start with? I think so.
I got one question.
Oh, sure.
Do you do permanent supportive housing at all? Or,
We're soon.
oh, okay. Okay, so let's go ahead. Karen Fay from Center for Enriched Living.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And I'm Karen Fay. I'm the grants manager at the Center for Enriched Living. Just to share a little bit about myself, I started in many years ago when I was right out of college at a residential agency right outside of Chicago for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I really enjoyed working there and being part of that community. My life took some different turns, but I've been with the Center for Enriched Living for the last 6 years in a different way. I'm no longer on the program side now. I'm on the, I guess, the fundraising arm. So it's a little different role, but I enjoy it just as much, and I'm very happy to be at the Center for Enriched Living. So CEL, or the Center for Enriched Living, is a non-residential organization for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. In a typical year, we serve about 400 individuals, youth through adults. Some live at home with their families, some live independently, and some live in residential agencies. We welcome all ages and abilities. So we have individuals who maybe need more assistance, and individuals that are and need less so. We are located in Riverwoods, which is near Deerfield, but serve individuals in 50 different Chicagoland communities. We really don't have an actual service area. So we're able to invite individuals who would like to be part of our programs to our center and Riverwoods, and then we also have programming out in the community as well. Our programs are available year-round, 7 days a week, basically 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And they address the 4 largest areas that we see our members needing, which is social isolation and social enrichment. So we have 60 weekly evening and weekend programs for youth, adults, and older adults to help address social isolation and social enrichment opportunities. We have our Reach Day program, which is focused on helping those that transition out of the school system at 22 and are looking for additional opportunities for community-based activities, skill building, and volunteering. That program is offered Monday through Friday, and it's really just to build those social opportunities with peers, continue building and growing as they want and need. We have our employment opportunities program, which addresses the 85% unemployment rate for individuals with disabilities. So we have, the program really brings all stages of the job process, including job training and coaching. And then it really focuses on the person finding the job that they're related to, that they are looking for from a career interest in the community of their choice, and also with competitive wages. The last focus, which is a new focus for the Center for Enriched Living, is really focusing on that mental health and wellness piece. We're going to be opening a family resource center later this year called the Robert B. Hahn Family Resource Center, which will be focusing on providing that continuum of care that families are seeking. So maybe the resources or information, mental health counseling, therapeutic, behavioral services, and peer support services. CEL has been in existence for 50 years. And just to share a little bit that we are not funded by the state or federal fund. We don't receive state or federal funding. From our organizational budget, we are primarily, receive donations from individuals. So we have 2 large events, and we have grants that come through as well. So only 2% is raised or brought in through state or federal funding.
Oh, question, do people have to come to your center to get services, or do you have people who go out to people's homes?
So the individuals will come to the Center for Enriched Living to receive services. We do have programming that's out in the community. So we might have, for example, we have connections with local schools that will have after school programs. We also have had connections with local residential agencies where we would have programming there. But the majority of individuals do come to the center for programs.
And you provide transportation at all? Is that-
So transportation is a challenge, and I think maybe we all can agree on that. But prior to COVID, we did have transportation to some programs that we offer, not to all. It's a hardship of staff time, and as you can imagine, just time in general and cost. But we do have a fleet of about 10 vehicles. So once individuals are at the Center for Rich Living, we then go out into the community with our vehicles as needed.
And does the township, where you are, do they have like disability buses or something like that? I know some townships do that.
There are some, so individuals that do come to the Center for Rich Living come through PACE, Uber, private transportation, things like that. There are townships in the area that do offer transportation. Unfortunately, it's somewhat limiting, so depending on when the program is, they're able to use that.
Well, thank you. Okay, so Francesca, let's hear about a little bit of ups and downs and how you got hooked into the
708. Yeah, so I have a very different story. Warren, my heart goes out to you. So I went through the same thing with an elder brother who has been diagnosed with schizophrenia. I was born and raised in Mount Prospect, left for about 30 years, came back to take care of my brother and my mother. And I will tell you, the last 5 to 6 years have been, excuse my language, living hell with trying to get my brother into a facility and be taken care of. And right now I'm looking at, I'm going to retire at some point, and what do I do with him in a center if I leave the state, and then what happens to him? So really moving for me, one of the things that I said is once I got him settled in a place, I was going to go fight for mental health, because this is something that unless you're a family member and understanding what you have to fight to do to get through, and the agonizing times and the times that you have to call the police and have them there, and the amount of money that gets spent for ambulances and police departments is insane. So passing this referendum, this is nothing. We are going to save money by having extra funds for that. So that's the first thing. I'm part of a group called Ups for Downs. My uncle had Down syndrome, and I had the pleasure of being with him and growing up with him. I will tell you, Down syndrome children are amazing. They are the most loving, caring people in the world. So Ups for Downs is we're out helping families to get their children into society, get them jobs, different things like that. Our organization, we are 100% volunteer. We don't get state funding. We don't get anything. We do our own fundraising. I was just Sunday, I was out at the marathon, the Chicago Marathon. We had 30 runners in the race for us. The kids were on the charity block party, putting their hands out. The runners were just ecstatic to see these children there cheering them on. And I also brought you in the back table. I brought you, and I will invite you all to our dinner dance, which is the end of October here. Please come. But again, if we don't do these fundraisers, then we can't put on programs for these kids and these families to help them move forward with their lives. That's a little bit about us.
Okay, great, thanks. And just a little Chicago Marathon tidbit. My wife and I were down there watching.
Yeah.
And the first place a woman runner is breaking the world record by 0.4 of a second.
Wow.
Anyway, so thank you very much.
That's
So
heartbreaking or not.
totally off the subject. What do you see happening? And Dr. Hollis, what do you see happening in communities with regards, to people with IDD? Is it, are there trends, or is it just miscellaneous things happening, or what's brewing?
Sorry. Well, a couple of different trends. Certainly, employment is a big trend. The state has made some significant changes in how they funded employment in actually a very good way. Historically, a lot of the employment for individuals with IDD was site-based, or like some of you might know, like the workshop 14C certificate, where you could do a sub-minimum wage, and most agencies are going away from that and looking towards more customized or community employment. So that's definitely a trend that we're seeing. It's a very good market right now if you're looking for a job. So, we really are targeting and focusing on getting individuals out there in jobs that they feel would be meaningful. I think the other trend we're seeing is that younger families are looking for different services, especially in regards to housing. The group home model, I think, is good for some families and for some individuals, but I think other families are looking for alternatives, whether it's living with a roommate or living in a supportive housing type of situation. We're seeing some trends of people kind of just looking for something different. So we want to meet that need. And then the other trend, which I think is really, honestly, it's probably international, but nationwide, that you all are familiar with, is that, since the pandemic, I think mental health has been on the forefront of everybody's mind, right? And so with our community, they suffered just as we did. And so we're really seeing a big push and a need for individuals to get out and talk about what their experience was like, have individual or group therapy sessions. And we're trying to connect with individuals with disabilities in a variety of different ways. For example, at Clearbrook, we have an art therapy program. We're doing some different things with ACT and DBT, which are therapeutic or theoretical orientations kind of to treat individuals, not only with mental illness, but we're seeing that it's really working well with people with IDD.
Okay, so Karen, what are you seeing? You're changing or staying the same, unfortunately, or staying the same, which is good?
I think I'm going to start by saying Illinois is always ranked near the bottom of the country in funding for services for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I 100% agree with Hollis in terms of all the pieces of where the trends are going or where we need to go. We are seeing the need for more individualized programming options. So that could be for employment services, adult day program, but really having those options to choose what that individual wants to do on a day-to-day basis. Really helping them become successful in whatever that is for them. Health and wellness, again, that's a huge topic. It was pre-COVID, it's post-COVID. I think we're going to see that for a long time of that need for access to counseling services, future planning. Again, just having the ability to know where to go to find those answers. The other piece that we're seeing is it's called trauma-enforced care, which is really the ability for staff to recognize the impact of a past trauma. And helping the individual kind of bring that into a way to help them kind of address it and then be able to move past it, or be able to just let them figure out what that is. So, for example, if someone's having a tough day, the individual with disabilities, we're really looking for that root cause of what that is, what's going on, and so that we're able to address the actual cause. And then the last thing I would just add is the social aspect, the need for that continuous peer-to-peer, continuous building of relationships and how that's done. It's just, there's little pieces here and there, but that need is just continuous.
Francesca?
So I'm gonna echo, everything that you all have talked about. I will tell you that there is a very large difference between the Down syndrome that I remember from the 60s and where Down syndrome is today. To the point where I was at a board meeting and one of the young ladies who has Down syndrome, who sits on the board, and we were at a restaurant and she ordered a glass of wine, and I looked at her and she's like, what you talking about? I'm like, you can have wine. She's like, yeah, you can. So how old are you? I'm 36. So anyhow, we as society have done a great job with helping and developing these young people, but it's the same thing. It's what you said, right? Lots of funds. We're a volunteer organization. It's hard to raise money. When COVID hit, that was horrible. And then the children's and the family, we couldn't get together and meet. So again, that mental piece of it kicked in as well. If employers would be open to hire people with Down syndromes or other disabilities, that would be a huge help. housing and transportation, that you guys have already mentioned. So, thank you.
So, is there a trend? I know it used to be in the state, and probably lots of states, that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities were kind of warehoused in these huge institutions. Are those still around, or are those being faded out or replaced, or are they still with us?
They're still state operated developmental centers, maybe 7. It might be 7. Is it still 7? So yes, I mean, that still is a thing at in Illinois.
Is there any kind of movement to close them down?
There's one that's been in the news quite a bit lately. But I do know that, I mean, long time ago when Pat Quinn was governor, I mean, he was making some real headway to try and close them. I'm honestly, I'm not well versed on where they're at now. I just know that they still do exist. Yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks. And then the other trend, are you seeing in society at large more acceptance of people with developmental disabilities, or is it still loaded with stigma and ridicule, or is it getting better, getting worse? You say?
I think the answer is it depends, right? So it depends on how you've raised your families. If you're living with the old 50s and 60s mindset, the more forward-thinking people are accepting and understanding this, but you still have the old trends that are still out there.
Yeah, okay. Another question. What areas do your organizations need help? What kind of help would help? And what things could be done? What areas are, need a lot of help? What areas maybe things are okay?
Yeah, a couple different areas. Respite services for families and individuals that aren't connected to any sort of state funding. We definitely need more support in that area. The state has a small amount of funds that they give out to a particular, you have to apply for that, I think it's a 3-year cycle. But definitely for families who aren't connected to any sort of state dollars. Transportation, like we've talked about, it's extremely underfunded. And it's needed to get to and from different places in the community and live in society, but it's needed to get a job. It's kind of all ties into all of that. For us, especially now with me getting into the realm of behavioral health psychiatric services, I can't tell you how long the wait lists are for trying to see a psychiatrist that accepts Medicaid. And then support for family members as well. You have the individual that you're being served, but there's a whole system and network in there. And we see that those family members also need support. And then lastly, similar to what you had spoken about in the beginning, Warren, was money for transition, supports for transition. In the school system, the IEP process starts around age 14. And I'm sure you can attest to this, there's a slew of questions and things that you have to follow through with. But if we had something that helped bridge that gap at 22 to help people be successful after they've had all the support, it's kind of seems like sometimes, to wait 10 years for something, people regress and you sometimes starting up, from scratch. So I think some more beefed up supports in transition would really be effective too.
Yeah. Karen, what are you saying?
Can I just say I agree? No, I absolutely agree with everything that Alice just shared. I think the fact with the Center for Rich Living starting the Family Resource Center, I think that's really addressing some of the needs that we're seeing immediately with families, what they need for resources, what the individuals with developmental disabilities need as well. We are starting a program called Catalyst in January. And it's really going to be looking at bridging what our day program is and our employment program. So it's individuals who are kind of in this in between where maybe they are looking for something more than a day program, but maybe aren't ready to go into the employment program. So the Catalyst program will be an 8 to 10 week session focused on building life skills, meal planning, budgeting, housekeeping, navigating community resources, really individualized. So that is, the individual, whatever they're looking for in building skill sets, that's what this program will be about. I 100% agree with employment and transportation. Those are all things that are needed for individuals with developmental.
So just on the mental illness part, so psychiatrists. My brother got kicked out of the practice because they couldn't handle his behavior in the waiting room. So you're talking about not being able to find somebody. I mean, it was devastating. So what are you supposed to do at that point? And family support. It wasn't until 5 years after working with him that a social worker finally came to me and said, "Are you taking care of yourself? What are you talking about?" And she said, "You need to take care of you. You've been supporting him." Nobody had ever mentioned that to me. So this year, when he says to me, "What are you doing for me?" I'm like, "I'm taking care of me. You're fine, you're sleeping, you've got your meds, and you're being fed. So now it's my time." So that, I mean, you hit that right on the head with that. Ups for downs, what we need is, it's 100% volunteer. So we need volunteers. That's what we're looking for. And we're also looking for money. And I have a donation card back there for you too. But we do, for example, we do a theater program, and last year we did Legally Blonde. And I don't know how many kids we had in this production, if there were 30 or 40 of them. But imagine having 30 or 40 children that you have to teach them all their lines, and some of them are adults as well, or sisters or siblings. And some of them can't be on stage by themselves, so people are out there helping them so that they can be part of this production. And then when you sell concessions, you need another 10 people out front selling concessions and bringing everything. So volunteers for us is what keeps our organization going. So if anybody's looking or knows somebody, or kids have, what is it now today? They do the support. Yes, community service hours, whatever it is. I mean, we're always looking for people to help. We do a lot of fun things, like the Chicago Marathon was awesome. My feet hurt afterwards, but it was okay, and I didn't run.
So, is there, I know in some people with substance abuse problems and mental illness problems, it's very hard to find services for the dual diagnosis. Is that the same with people with developmental disabilities and mental illnesses or substance abuse problems?
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, Hugh, that's one of the reasons that we, Clearbrook, really decided to open up a community mental health center. When we initially were looking at doing this, there were several initiatives around it, but what we had seen over the years was, and this was no disrespect to anybody, but somebody who had an SMI or serious mental illness, they went over here and they said, "No, but you also have IDD, so you have to go over here." So they just kind of ping-ponged back and forth. And then they fell through the cracks. I mean, that's what we saw. So we really set out with our first initiative for community mental health was really to serve that dual diagnosis, if you could say, that population.
Mm-hmm. Karen or Francesca, you want to jump in?
Yes, so I will add to that. So my brother is 6'2". He's a big guy. And when he was not on his meds, it was bad. And so we had Kenneth Young come out and they send this tiny little petite person. And I said, "You gotta send a big guy." And she stood at the door and he was not doing well that day. And she said, "I'm out of here." So again, these are the problems that families are facing. And it's debilitating.
So Kara or Warren, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I'll add a few things that 708s can do. I think
You're good.
think I'm
You're good. That's okay.
Let me know.
I'm going to turn it off.
I see you.
That I think may not be at first blush what people think of first, but can actually be very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
It is very difficult for community-based organizations like those that you are all representing to compete with a workforce that can sometimes be better compensated in other settings. And so sometimes one of the ways that 708s can be incredibly helpful is to start to bridge some of that gap, to be able to really have wages that reflect the complexity of the work that's happening. Another place where community-based organizations can often struggle is that it can be difficult for them to fund the professional education and continuing education that their staff need to continue to operate at the highest possible level. And so that's another place where 708s can be very helpful with incremental, modest funding that simply isn't in the budget of the organizations that we're working with. One of the other things that 708s can be helpful to support is capital projects, where you know that you have an aging building or a building that no longer meets the needs of the community that you're serving, but finding the resources to actually be able to see such a significant change in your physical plant can be really challenging, and that can be a place where 708s can be very helpful. And the other place where I think that we've learned, sadly, in this past few years is one of the things that we've really set as a goal for our 708 board is to set aside some funds for crisis response, for that thing that you can't anticipate. That, you know, when the bottom dropped out of all of our worlds in spring of 2020, the way that all of these organizations had to do their work changed dramatically and overnight. And if you didn't have the resources to support building technological tools in that would allow you to provide care for folks remotely, or, you know, you could find yourself in a really desperate situation. And so one of the things that we think is really important and why having such a local source of funding can really be relevant is for us to be able to be nimble and responsive and have some dollars that are set aside for that unintended thing that none of us could anticipate, but that when it happens, we need to be able to do something quickly. And it isn't fair to expect that Clearbook or the Center for Enriched Living or Ups or Downs to be able to necessarily have those resources readily in their bank account. But if the 708 has that resource and is able to distribute it quickly, then it could make a big difference in the lives of the families we're all serving. So those are some of the ways that I think 708 funding can be most helpful.
I can add some of the transportation horror stories. So we live in Arlington Heights. My daughter works at Harper College. It's about 7 miles, and it's not actually oh yeah, 7. Okay, sorry. So we live in Arlington Heights. Is it on?
Yes.
Okay, Arlington Heights, and my daughter works at Harper College. It's about 7 miles with no traffic. It's about 20 minutes or so. During traffic rush hour, everything goes up by 50%. So we have ended up applying for through the Regional Transportation Authority for the paratransit bus, which is a schedule. You make a reservation at least a day in advance, and they'll come pick you up and drop you off at your destination. Well, they route you through, you know, it's basically how are we going to take care of hundreds or thousands of people. I don't know how many the numbers are, but so the bus will come, and then she'll end up going to Mount Prospect, and then sometimes it was like Elk Grove or Burr Ridge one time, you know, and like it's 6 o'clock at night and she's on a bus, and sometimes they've had to call the police because the people on there were just yelling at the driver, you know, just uncontrollably. They shouldn't have been on there unsupervised or something like that. So we finally got rid of that, right? We said, can't, she's a girl, I'm not gonna let her, you know, I don't want her on the bus with people like that. So then we go to Uber, but that's like, can be $30 one way. Without rush hour, it's maybe half of that or so, but that's $45 for a day. And that's probably more than she's making now. We don't care. I don't really, it doesn't matter. We're on the other side of the track, so we don't have to worry about that, but I'm sure there's a lot of families where that is a big factor, you know, so yeah, transportation out here is a big challenge.
Yeah, so we were talking at the forum, we were talking about one of the panelists was a woman who worked for Live for Loud, a substance abuse group. And she had people that were getting services in McHenry County and also Lake County. And McHenry County has a 708 board that would provide transportation. They would hire Ubers or cabs or various sorts of transportation for people to get to their appointments and services. And she was always having to scramble in Lake County because there was little transportation, sort of the difficulties that you were describing. So another question is, do any of your the 3 organizations get help from 708 boards? how does that work? And, could you talk about that process a little bit?
Yes, Clearbrook does. We actually we have another area region that we serve in McHenry County called Clearbrook West. It started several years ago. We were actually in McHenry County in our home-based program. We were serving, I don't know, maybe 40 or 50 families in that area. And actually the families were one of the advocates that came to us and said, we want more services, in our area. And the McHenry County Mental Health Board has been incredibly generous over the past, I think 5, maybe misspeaking, but 5 years. Started funding for a number of Scylla homes that we have in the community. They fund our Choice Community Day Services, which is in Crystal Lake. They help subsidize and fund. We recently opened up another Choice program in Woodstock and opened up a group home in Woodstock and are looking to do a second home. So they've been incredibly generous. And then back to what I was, my earlier comment, we actually were initially going to start our community mental health center here in Cook County. Just we're established here, I live around here. It was kind of going to be easier, if you will. But, they had heard that this was what we were interested in and said, hey, we could use some more of those services out in McHenry County. We would be willing to help fund to get this started. And that's really why we went to Crystal Lake to start. And it was lovely. Not only did you get to start a brand new service with, there was some risk, but minimal risk financially. So you weren't stressed about that and you could focus kind of on the qualitative piece of it. In addition to that, we got ourselves a nice, little framework for what we want in a community mental health center. And now we can now go mimic that in other locations and other geographic areas that we serve, which has been, it's really been a joy. So, we couldn't be more grateful for their support. And to your point, Kara, there is a lot of accountability with the 708 board. Which we welcome. Not only are they transparent, but we as an organization have to be transparent to them. We have to submit data on what we're doing, and we have to have outcomes. This is a reciprocating relationship between the provider agency that's providing the service and of course the taxpayer then that's giving that money. So it's been a great relationship so far.
So how do you ensure that? Because one of the things we've been telling people is that all the money raised, say in Wheeling Township, is only for Wheeling Township residents. So how do you ensure, and I don't know, maybe either you or one of the others or Kara, how do you ensure that it's only going for residents of that unit?
Do you guys want to speak to that or?
We're not getting any money.
No.
We get some money, I can talk about it.
Yeah, if you'd like, go ahead.
So Bloomingdale Township, as I said, is a funding source for my organization, and we have 6,000 individuals that we serve throughout DuPage County. But each township can have little bits and pieces of all of those different communities, and it can sometimes be a complicated thing, more complicated when you have volumes like those that I'm speaking of. If you're an organization that's providing intensive services to a smaller number of people, you can literally look up each one of those individuals and confirm that their US Postal Service address is exactly as it's supposed to be. I really don't want to do that 6,000 times. So we actually use geocoding with ArcGIS software once every 3 years to plot out exactly where our members live. And it is baked into the township application for funding that we be able to explain exactly how we came to the numbers that we have. And it's baked into our outcomes reporting to similarly be able to reaffirm that we are serving who we said we would. Similarly at Milton, we did the same thing because it is taxpayer money and people have every right to believe that their tax dollars based on the statute are going to be spent for their community. So that's one of the pieces that is probably hardwired into the philosophy of how 708s operate. And it's why the application and all of the reporting has to then follow suit.
I'm just gonna add to that, from the grant perspective, I feel like I do a lot of reporting for this. And we are in our database, as soon as someone is entered into our database, we add the township and what county they're part of, and so that there's tracking for us as well. So when they move, that's followed in our database as well. So that is an easy way for us to track, but you're right, when you have 6,000, I mean, you can't do that. I mean, obviously we can do a database with queries and things like that, but that's been the most effective for us to be able to track that.
If you don't own property, your township is not necessarily a piece of information that you're necessarily very well acquainted with. And because many of our families have very limited incomes, township is not a driving determination for them. And so we've had to go to some creative methods, but I like yours. It sounds a lot better.
Once it's set up, it's perfect. It helps.
Add something, Francesca?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, here's a question before a few minutes before we get to audience questions. If suddenly the 708 board was to materialize, and this isn't the normal procedure, normally the agencies would apply for grants, but just supposing out of the blue, $200,000 got dumped in your lap for your agency, how would you spend it? What would be the number one thing?
That is a great question. I think from an organizational perspective, that is a topic that like the board of directors often talk about, all of a sudden you get this donation and what you're going to be able to do with it. I think the Center for Enriched Living is living that dream right now with the starting this family resource center and this Catalyst program to really address those specific needs that we're seeing with our families and our individuals that we serve. I think that I would love a transportation piece to be part of that. I mean, there would be like just the extension of all those pieces. The fact that I know we've been talking about employment a lot, but the other piece to the employment is kind of educating the community and educating employers. So having a little bit bigger arm and being able to do that as well.
I'll be selfish because I'm thinking about the programs that I oversee. But I would, two things. To your point here, that the training, the stipend training dollars for continuing education for the clinicians. Part of what helps with quality of services is helping the clinicians feeling that they have the toolkit that they need and feeling that they're having making a meaningful impact. And there's a lot of out there that can be pretty costly. So I would definitely use some of it for that. And then we are partnering with an organization called Station MD for telehealth psychiatric services. There's some upfront dollars that you need to use in order to get the equipment in order to do those services. So I would definitely use some of the money for that. And then I would also utilize some of the money for supplies for our community mental health center. Between our mindful and meditation room and our art therapy, those supplies they're costly and yeah, I think that would probably cover the whole. I think, yeah.
And Francesca, you're an all-volunteer organization. So.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so one of the things, the theater program that we do, it runs probably $1,000 to $1,200 per child to put them through that program. So the families are picking up probably somewhere between $150 and $250 per child. So if they have 2 children in the program, right? So if they may have a child with Down syndrome, but their sibling wants to be in it. So that's expensive. So we could immediately lower that cost and maybe get more children involved in the theater program, which would be amazing if we were able to do that. And then maybe try to work on housing and transportation. I think are the big key things.
Great, thanks. Okay, so let's get to some audience questions. I guess this question is for Kara. How much time is involved in the first year of a 708 board? What knowledge or experience is most useful?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure that the amount of time was equally shared across all of the board members, which is fine. That's the way these things work. Shannon and I are really passionate about this topic and come with some information that other board members don't necessarily have, so we end up needing more. The meetings themselves are, in our case, typically once a month. with a good amount of email exchange outside of that. We also had to hire a staff person during the pandemic and develop a budget and develop levy recommendations and the community needs assessment. So it's a little bit of a sort of that feeling that you have when you're building a house and it feels like it's taken forever, but you don't realize that what you're actually doing is building the foundation. And once you get past that initial piece, you're going to see the results of your work in a much more profound way. A lot of that first year is about building the foundation. And the second year is a lot more fun because now we actually have applicants and a staff person and the opportunity to be excited about some of the proposals that are coming our way. The meetings themselves are not typically very long, and I've looked at enough minutes from a number of other 708 boards to confirm that I think that's actually common. And so one in-person meeting a month, probably 1 to 2 hours in duration, and probably for at least the leadership of the 708 multiplier of maybe 3 or 4 times that on a monthly basis in terms of work that's happening outside. And then during the funding cycle itself, we've taken the tactic that we really want every member to review every application because we know that there could be unintended consequences of breaking them out into categories. And so we have 21 applications that range from, it's a little misleading to say that they're 50 and 60 pages long. That's because oftentimes the 990 and audit take up a whole big chunk of, there's a lot of compliance that we do from a due diligence perspective to make sure that the organizations are financially sound, that they're positioned to actually spend and report as they said they would. The application itself is not terribly long, probably about 5 pages long, with a fair amount of multiple choice and then some places where people can stretch their lights a little bit. But we're also looking to know who the board of directors is. We want to know that their audit and compliance documents are in correct order, et cetera. So the review process is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of at least 30 minutes per application, 30 to 60 minutes per application with 20 applications, another 20 hours or so of work across the fall. And then some additional in-person meetings so that when we have questions that we want to be able to explore with the candidates, we can have them come in and have conversations with us. So it's not just an exercise on pen and paper.
This question is probably for Hollis or Karen. Are sheltered workshops still a major component of IDD services? Or are they kind of going fading out? Or
I think they're fading. That definitely the move from the sub minimum wage and contract work that individuals with disabilities used to do is really shifting towards competitive and integrated employment in the community.
Okay.
It's going to be a slow transition. I think when you have a person that has worked in that kind of environment for a long period of time, you can't. It's hard sometimes to reintegrate, but that's part of what our role is, to help get people back out in the community.
So this is a thing that we run into as advocates for 708 boards. And anybody jump in on this one. How do we respond to people who say taxes are already too high? Because it is a property tax increase that would fund the board. Yeah, go ahead. Anybody?
Yeah, so I would just say that we probably, just with my brother alone, we probably had at least 6 to 7 between fire and police at his home, probably 6 to 7 times a year. So imagine the savings for the village, for that not having to be there. And then we were on first name basis with this. So we're here again, right? And then look at the hospital staff and what happens in the hospitals because he doesn't have insurance, right? And then the time that's wasted there because we can't get him the help that he needs. So I mean, it's a huge savings, and that's what people need to understand.
So you're going to pay for it one way or the other. You could do it sensibly and efficiently, or stupidly and wastefully.
Yeah, and we did, for the village of Schaumburg, we had his house marked. So if they were getting a call, they knew what they were walking into. And like I said, we knew them. I mean, they would show up and like, we're back again. No, sorry.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else, ideas about taxes are too high?
I would point to my friend's son who's got off disability, I would point to those cases, you know. Some success.
Yeah, okay. Right, great. Okay, this probably was a question for Kara. Was Milton Township previously giving out grants related to mental health or developmental disabilities?
No, they were not.
Oh, okay, so this is something brand new for them.
Was, yeah. You know, there are only 2 708 boards in DuPage County right now, although we hope that there will be more in the coming months and years. But while township offices to a greater or lesser degree certainly provide some manner of general assistance back to residents of that township, and Milton did that as well, it would not be accurate to say that they were giving substantial funding to anything akin to what's happening now, either in Milton or in Bloomingdale. Many of our township offices operate food pantries, may provide some limited senior services or congregate meals in some cases. That's not to suggest they don't do good work. This is different work than the work that they have done in the past.
Kind of a similar question for you, Kara. Was the community needs assessment, I mean, you know, the board meets for the first time and it's like, okay, like the dog caught the car, now what to do? You know, so,
Mildly intimidating.
So what kind of, you know, help did the township give you in getting the needs assessment going, I guess?
That's a great question. And again, I don't think that we looked to the township to help us particularly with that. But it is to suggest that they wouldn't have been willing to do so. I think that probably because both Shannon and I do work in that space, we knew where to turn. And the biggest challenge was realizing, to your point, that no one is going, this is not a membership in name only. This is a working board. And it needs to be a working board because for the first year of our operation, we did not have a staff person at all. So anything that needed to be done, the minutes, the agendas, the bylaws, the creation of all of these pieces, we needed to do it. The upside is that we figured out that we actually could.
I know there's a statewide 708 board association, the Illinois Association.
Highly recommend.
Community Mental Health Authorities.
Yes.
Are they helpful at all?
They are, and they have a new member pricing that's very competitive and probably helps to. They actually, it's a trade association effectively of many of the community mental health boards. They are a wonderful resource. And I will say also that 708 boards are themselves a wonderful resource. No one is looking for any new 708 to have to reinvent something that someone else has already created. And folks have been so generous with us. And Jody and ACME, you know, if we have a question, I work in the sector and I know some of the organizations that are applying, and we had to figure out what a conflict of interest policy would look like, because I don't want to be voting on an application for someone where it might have a real or perceived conflict attached. So she puts out that email and there are instantly 12 conflict of interest policies for us to reply to and figure out which one works best for us. It's a very, very helpful resource.
Okay, and this one would be for Karen or Hollis or Francesca, I guess. How do folks find out about your services? How do they find out if they're eligible? Do you have a wait lists, or you know, people call intake, or how does that work?
We normally individuals hear about our programming word of mouth, more or less. We try to get into the school systems to share about our programs, to go out in the community, talk about what we do. We do have wait lists. I think that one of the challenges that we're facing right now, and this is probably for most organizations, is there's a staff shortage. And so that means that there are some wait lists for some of our programs. Was that, I'm not trying to remember what else. Does that sound?
Yeah, so how do people find out and how do they sign up?
We have, well, we've got a website, obviously, but a number of the referrals that come to Clearbrook actually come through the ISC, Community Alternatives Unlimited. Each county, they're region-based organizations, and they, it's a terrible word, but they're kind of the gatekeeper. So all of those initial eligibility determinations are done at those organizations, and then they refer out to providers for services. We certainly have wait lists in our residential programs. We also have established wait lists in many of our CDS programs. One that was primarily due to COVID and kind of getting back into the groove of things, but now it's the staff shortages. We just don't have enough people. And then additionally, in our home-based program, we actually refer to Center for Enriched Living. So while it's called a self-directed assistant or a case manager, part of what their coordination is to refer out to other organizations, maybe be Clearbrook, maybe be Upsford Downs or Center for Enriched Living, so that those individuals can get the services that are most meaningful to them.
So we're at upsforddowns.org, where our office is located in Schaumburg. So you can go out onto the website and ask to join anything. There's no waiting list. We take everybody. And if you have a newborn that's come in, we have a full library where we can give books and information to new parents on this is what the journey is going to look like.
Yeah, okay. All right. This is kind of a generic kind of question, but Warren's story is, really sad and complicated. And, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do the other thing. So who helps parents navigate the system? Or is it they're on?
I'll take that because I don't talk that loud. I mentioned earlier on, we came across these Benji and Brian Rubin from Rubin Law, and their office is on Lake Cook Road in Buffalo Grove. And all they do, Brian has a son with intellectual disability. Okay, so you know him well. But they've been, what we did is, I don't get into too many details, but I guess it doesn't matter. We ended up creating what's called a special needs trust for my daughter. And then when you do that, they give you help for indefinitely. You do that, but they do it somehow. So we'll get a letter from Medicare, SSDI transition. I didn't even mention all that headache, but where, oh, Catherine has made too much money. Oh my gosh, we're just over the limit now. We're going to cut your Medicare. Like, oh, we can't really. So we'll call them and they'll usually email or get on a phone call or something and navigate the eligibility. And I honestly can't keep it in my brain. It's too complicated, but these guys know it really well. So we wouldn't have made it without Ruben.
Thanks. Anybody else? How do people get help navigating?
Yeah, I mean, I would say too, in home base, that's part of what the case manager's role is to help families at every step. We do serve children as young as age 4. So, there's a wide variety of things that happen of what you would do for a 4-year-old versus a 44-year-old. I think also we do a lot of work with transition. We have a transition outreach specialist. Her name is Michelle Schwartz, and she's wonderful. She was actually funded through a grant through the Coleman Foundation several years ago. And so we have this robust transition program where we're out in the community talking to families. She attends different students' IEPs at various school districts in order to get them started and educated with kind of what those next steps are and how to navigate to your point. What happens with guardianship? What happens with SSI? How do I get connected to an agency like Center for Enriched Living or Upsford Downs? So we try to get people from all angles.
Yeah, okay. This question might be for Kara, it could be for anybody, but there's been these silos, substance abuse, IDD, mental illness, and it seems to be breaking down somewhat. Do the 708 boards help with that, do you think? Do you get your various providers together to talk about it? Or how
Great
does-
question. Yeah, I think that we have had hosted and hope to host more community conversations that are intended to sort of be incubators for ways that we could build things together that were not redundant and actually served families in a more significant way. I think that a 708 in its perfect form would do that. I think that the balancing act is making sure that you are letting the professionals also lead the conversation. We want to be informed by what our community-based organizations live, eat, and breathe. They are the experts. One of the ways that 708s can be helpful is identifying an unmet need and then actually putting out an RFP, inviting people to respond to that need. And I think that is a good idea. I just think that you wouldn't want to direct all of your funding to the idea that you want to solve, but rather be listening closely to what the agencies say they really most need. So you have to kind of,
Where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
I would say too, from our experience with McHenry, they do an excellent job of gathering providers together and giving them the forum to talk about what they do, so that when people leave, they're connected to, if we're dealing with this issue with substance abuse, but we don't do that, we know where to refer. Hanover, the 708 board in Hanover that we're beginning to partner with is the same way. Amanda and her team have been excellent with that.
Okay, good. So we are about out of time tonight. How about if we just go around right down the row and any last comments? We're going to say, but never came up, or closing remarks?
I don't have any comments. I'll share my email address. If anybody has any follow-up questions, more than happy to respond to them. I'm going to give you my work email because that's the one I'm on too often. That is kmurphy, KMURPHY @accesstopage.org. I do have a Milton Township email as well, but like I said, that's the right one.
Warren, anything else?
Oh, so I would say just for Lori here and her team that's putting this together, that, it's such a big problem out there in society that I would say go for the referendum and just say yes. And that with the trust that you've got the right people on the team, and it certainly sounds like we do tonight, that it would be a positive win for everybody, for society, for the families, for the kids, and for everybody, that everybody's going to win on it. And even this funding is even minuscule probably compared to the real size of the problem, but it's as JFK said, journey of 1,000 begins with a single step, something like that. So let's take this step and see where it goes.
Yeah, okay, great, thanks. Go ahead,
I
Alice.
don't know if I can follow
Well.
that.
Mic drop on JFK.
If people have questions, not only about Clearbrook, but about what we've done in our experience personally with 708 boards, they certainly can email me as well. My work email it's actually my H and my last name, GORRIE @clearbrook.org. Thanks for listening, and thanks for having me. I will tell you that the 708 board has been, not only have they been extremely generous, but they've been held us extremely accountable. And I think we've really developed some good, solid programming based off of their support. So it's a really good thing.
And just thank you for having the Center for Rich Living here. The need is really great for organizations like CEL and Clearbrook and Ups for Downs for helping individuals with developmental disabilities. So thank you.
So thank you again, but I'm gonna just, what Warren said, this is a very tiny dollar amount, and the need is huge, and I can only speak from the family side. And these families need help, and there's nobody there to help them, and this is what's at least going to be a starting point to be able to help these families that are in dire need of assistance. So this is just something, it's a no-brainer. Please just go for it.
Yeah, so thank you very
Can I
much to
add?
our panelists and thank, oh,
Can I add, so I'm Heidi and I'm with the League of Women Voters of Arlington Heights, Mount Prospect, Buffalo Grove. And we've been very happy to partner with NAMI and to have Lori as part of our leadership on this particular issue. But we do need to encourage everybody to vote. We can talk about these things, we can have great intentions, but if we don't actually get out to the polls, and if we don't get our neighbors and our friends and our family to also get out to the polls, our voter turnout at the midterm election, which is what is coming up, is horrendous. So it's been our whole goal. The league is in just our area. We have touched nearly 10,000 voters through some of our programs, also an all volunteer organization. And I just can't say it enough to get out and vote. You can, for all your voting information, it's www.LWV-AH.org. And you can register to vote, find, plan your ballot, all of that stuff. So thank you so much.
okay, thank you to our panel and safe travels and early voting has begun.
Yeah, when does it start soon, right?